Hello there guys and welcome back to another video. In today's video we'll be taking a look at the Ghosts of Saltmarsh adventure, specifically the Sinister Secrets of Saltmarsh. Now chapter 1 of this adventure is dedicated entirely to the town of Saltmarsh and how you can place it in locations, the types of people that you'll find there, the kinds of shops and stores and that kind of thing that you'll find around this town. Generally speaking, this is a really interesting chapter, and if you're looking for a way to expand this adventure, the first place I would start is in the town of Saltmarsh. You can add your own NPCs into this sort of thing, and you can really make it your own. But this gives a really fantastic overview of the town in general. Now, Saltmarsh is actually located in a really interesting region, and as you can see from this map, there's actually a lot of places around this area that you can go and that you can explore, and that your players can go and explore. So it's a really nice area, not too big, not too small, with a lot of points of interest that you can really use to expand this whole region. So on to chapter 2, the Sinister Secrets of Saltmarsh. Now this adventure is for low level characters, and it's a pretty decent adventure to introduce if your characters are starting off in the town of Saltmarsh. There's only one sort of thing that I would consider with this adventure, is it's quite generic, it's quite simple, and at the end of it your players could end up with a ship at a very low level. Now that's fantastic if you want your players to have a ship, a means of travelling across the sea. However, for the majority of campaigns, this is probably going to be a little bit too powerful and a little bit too much of a reward for the adventure that they go through to get it. So right at the start of the adventure we have the adventure hooks and this general, and the adventure summary here, and this general section is very useful for getting a good idea and a gauge of this adventure. It also includes a section of where to set the adventure. Now the adventurers will probably head to this house because they hear that it is haunted, and I think that is a really interesting concept. After going through the house and exploring the house and trying to find out kind of what is going on in this mansion, they will eventually descend into the basement where they will find out that there's a smuggling operation going here. As if by magic, at the same point that they arrive here, they'll probably end up seeing out onto the sea and see a ship. On this ship, this is the smuggler ship, and they can actually go to this ship and attempt to take it over, thus gaining a ship for their adventures. They also learn something really interesting here, and that is that the smugglers that have been operating in this area and using this idea that there is a haunted house in order to keep locals away from where they've been smuggling. These smugglers are actually responsible for providing weapons to a group of lizard folk, and that is a great hook for future adventures. Now here's my issue with this adventure in general. What I found when looking at this adventure is that a lot of the rooms seem very generic, quite empty, nothing particularly special or that interesting about this. And the issue is because this is an introductory adventure, you want your players to have a taste of combat, you want them to have a taste of role-playing, but you also want to set up some of the themes for your campaign and for future adventures. Now I think obviously if you're running a seafaring campaign, one in which your players need a ship, this is a fantastic one to start off with. And that is the plot and the summary of this book, is that a lot of these adventures take place in port towns and on the sea, and there's loads of encounters like that, so it's a fantastic one for introducing new players to, if you want to have them going through a sort of like a pirate-like campaign. Where I think the issues kind of start with is if you don't want your players to necessarily go through a campaign like that. You may want them to have a ship, but you may not want them to have it at lower levels, and of course your players aren't going to be very high in levels after completing this adventure. Not only that, but they're also going to have a ship, which is a pretty expensive and like fantastic tool for them to have. It's a great vehicle for them to own, which opens up a lot of doors. It means that exploration is no longer limited to a regional area. And not limiting exploration to a regional area is kind of an issue, because if we look at this map, this fantastic map with a bunch of different places the adventurers can go and explore, all of a sudden the adventurers may not decide to explore any of this map. All of the work that this adventurer has spent setting up this region completely wasted if your adventurers decide we're just going to sail south and explore the Azure Sea. So how do I recommend tweaking this adventure and making it a little bit easier and more comfortable for DMs? Well, there's a few ways you can go about doing this. This page right here introduces you to a skeleton alchemist, and the really interesting thing about this is this skeleton alchemist is kind of hinted at that he was the previous owner of this mansion that is still alive, just in this skeleton form. I really like the idea that maybe after you fought 6 old skeletons that lurk in the shadows of this of Area 23, maybe the skeleton alchemist realizes that you are not really a threat, but you are actually very capable fighters. The party could be very useful to him. So here's my question: what happens if you have this skeleton alchemist actually become a quest giver, an NPC? He's undead, he can't just walk into the town of Saltmarsh himself, but he needs ingredients. He needs alchemy ingredients to try and return himself to life. Maybe the only reason he's alive is because an experiment went wrong, and he's looking for some way to return himself to flesh. Now, it's up to you whether or not he's actually evil, or he's actually a good guy who's just run into a really bad situation. Maybe after the PCs have actually done a few quests for him, he decides to open up about some information. There's actually a band of smugglers that have been using the underside of his house. They've been paying him a small price to use the basement of his home to store things. But now these smugglers have they've served their purpose, and if the party want to, they can get rid of them, because these smugglers are definitely bad people. They are not doing good things. They are breaking a lot of rules, breaking a lot of laws, and maybe on board the smuggler's ship, they have some ingredients that the alchemist needs. Well, now we have a really interesting character. This character of the alchemist is able to give the party reason to go to these different locations because he wants some rare ingredients from these sites. This might take a couple sessions of gameplay. We're talking about extending this adventure to a much larger degree. Now, of course, your party might decide, you know what, this is a skeleton, we're just going to kill it, and that's totally fine, and let them make that decision. But if you're looking for a way to kind of give your party more of a reason to not just jump on a sailing ship and sail off into the distance, then this is a really good way of doing that. Have a really interesting NPC that is limited to just staying within this ruined mansion, and have the party do some quests for them. Give them some really nice characterization, a lot of information about the character, and you are good to go. Additionally, you can easily get your party back onto the main quest line, onto the main story of this book, by just having the smugglers turn up and having the party face off against them. Maybe the alchemist has grown sick of the smugglers, so the party face off against them, they get the ship, and the story continues exactly as intended. My plan isn't to derail this adventure that you find in this book, because the adventure is actually a really good one, and I think it's the first 3 adventures actually tie together fantastically. But my issue is that this first mission is a pretty poor one, and you don't have a lot of role-playing experience within this adventure unless you're looking at the town of Saltmarsh. Now, I'm not one of those people to throw away with an encounter that's in a book. So when we take a look at the sea ghost, the ship that these smugglers are using, when eventually the party come into contact with these smugglers and deal with them, you can run this through this encounter exactly as it is written, and hopefully by that point your party will be a higher level as well to be able to deal with these guys. Maybe even you could increase the stats of some of these people to make the combat a little bit more dangerous. Maybe the mage that is actually running this smuggling operation is actually a full mage and not kind of like a variant on the mage stat block. Well guys, there we have it. That is my idea for kind of expanding upon this adventure, sort of the hints and tips that I've sort of picked up. The adventure is actually really good. The Sinister Secrets of Saltmarsh is a fantastic adventure and is a great one for new players. The only issue is that I feel like if you fly through it and you just make that a 1-session adventure instead of sort of like prolonging it with some interesting NPCs, then you can miss out on a lot of the joys of Saltmarsh as a town. You can miss out a lot of the details in Saltmarsh and the surrounding area because your party will have access to the entire ocean. I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.